Sometimes the safest place to fall asleep is beside a stranger with a kind heart. The overnight flight from Seattle to Chicago had barely reached cruising altitude when the cabin finally grew quiet. The soft hum of the engines blended with the dim reading lights overhead. Outside the window, the clouds looked like an endless ocean beneath the moon. Inside seat 23A, a young mother struggled to keep her eyes open. Emma cradled her 8-month-old daughter against her chest, gently rocking the baby with the same rhythm she had repeated for countless sleepless nights. A diaper bag rested beneath her feet. A nearly empty bottle sat inside the seat pocket. Her phone displayed 3 missed calls from a landlord she could no longer afford to answer. She quietly turned the screen dark. Not tonight. Tonight, all she wanted was for her little girl to sleep. The baby let out one small whimper. Emma smiled immediately. "It is okay, sweetheart. Mommy is right here." Her voice was barely louder than a whisper. Across the aisle, several passengers glanced toward the sound before returning to their books and headphones. Beside Emma sat a man wearing a charcoal gray jacket over a simple white shirt. No expensive watch caught the cabin lights. No assistants surrounded him. No one recognized the billionaire who had boarded the aircraft without attracting attention. Alexander preferred traveling that way. It reminded him what ordinary life sounded like. He noticed the young mother's tired hands before he noticed anything else. Her fingers trembled slightly each time she adjusted the baby's blanket. Not from fear. From exhaustion. The flight attendant approached with a warm smile. "Can I bring you anything, ma'am?" Emma hesitated. Then she forced a grateful smile. "No, thank you. We are fine." Alexander quietly looked toward the unopened bottle of water resting beside him. He slid it gently across the shared armrest. "You may need this more than I do." Emma blinked in surprise. "Oh, I could not." "You can. It is only water." She looked at the bottle for a moment before accepting it with both hands. "Thank you. You are very kind." Alexander simply nodded. No parent should have to apologize for being tired. Those words lingered in the silence long after the conversation ended. The cabin lights dimmed even further. The baby finally drifted into peaceful sleep. Emma leaned back carefully, afraid even the smallest movement might wake her daughter. Her eyelids became heavier with every passing minute. She tried reading a worn notebook. The words blurred. She checked the baby's tiny face again, then the window, then the ceiling. She fought sleep with quiet determination. She lost. Slowly, almost without realizing it, her head tilted sideways. It came to rest against Alexander's shoulder. Several nearby passengers noticed immediately. One elderly woman smiled softly. A businessman looked up from his laptop. Even the flight attendant paused halfway down the aisle. Emma never stirred. She slept with the complete trust of someone whose body had finally surrendered after carrying too much for too long. Alexander remained perfectly still. He could have moved. He did not. Instead, he carefully adjusted his own posture so her neck would rest more comfortably. A few moments later, the baby's blanket slipped toward the floor. Without making a sound, he caught the corner before it fell. Then he gently covered the little girl again. No one applauded. No one spoke. The quiet kindness belonged only to that moment. Outside the window, the stars stretched endlessly across the night sky. Inside the cabin, one exhausted mother finally found the rest she had been chasing for weeks. She never realized. The stranger whose shoulder had become her pillow was a man whose name appeared on the tallest buildings in cities across America. The cabin remained wrapped in quiet darkness. Only the faint glow above the aisle painted soft lines across sleeping faces. The steady sound of the engines became almost comforting. It sounded like the world had finally decided to whisper. Emma did not move. Her breathing became slower. For the first time in many weeks, there was no worry written across her face. Only peace. Alexander remained exactly where he was. His shoulder had grown stiff. He never shifted away. Comfort belonged to the exhausted mother beside him now. The flight attendant returned with a fresh blanket folded neatly over her arm. She slowed as she reached their row. A gentle smile crossed her face. "I can wake her if you would like, sir." Alexander looked toward Emma for only a moment. She still held her daughter with protective arms, even while sleeping. He quietly shook his head. No, please let her rest. The flight attendant lowered her voice even further. Her neck must be making your shoulder uncomfortable. Alexander smiled faintly. I will recover. She probably needs this more than I need comfort. The attendant nodded with quiet understanding. Without disturbing Emma, she handed Alexander the blanket. He carefully unfolded it. Every movement was slow, every motion deliberate. He gently covered Emma's shoulders first. Then he tucked the remaining corner around the sleeping baby. The little girl sighed softly. She never opened her eyes. Several rows behind them, an older couple exchanged quiet smiles. The husband leaned toward his wife. There are still good people. She squeezed his hand gently. There always have been. Alexander pretended not to hear them. Kindness felt lighter when nobody applauded it. Nearly an hour passed. The captain announced mild turbulence ahead. The seatbelt sign illuminated with a quiet chime. The aircraft began to sway gently through the night sky. Emma instinctively tightened her arms around her daughter without waking completely. The baby's bottle rolled toward the edge of the tray table. Alexander caught it before it could fall. He secured it inside the seat pocket. A moment later, the baby stirred. Tiny fingers stretched into the air. A sleepy sound escaped her lips. Emma remained deeply asleep. Alexander looked toward the infant with calm patience. His expression softened. The little girl opened her eyes for only a second. She looked at the unfamiliar face beside her mother. Instead of crying, she quietly reached one tiny hand toward him. Alexander hesitated briefly, then offered a single finger. Her tiny hand wrapped around it. She smiled. The simple gesture lasted only a few seconds, yet somehow, it felt larger than the entire cabin. Around them, the turbulence faded. The aircraft settled smoothly once again. The baby drifted back to sleep while still holding his finger. Alexander waited patiently until her tiny hand relaxed on its own. Only then did he move. He glanced toward the family photograph tucked inside the diaper bag's outer pocket. A younger Emma smiled beside a little girl only a few days old. The edges of the photograph had become worn from being handled often. It was not carelessly placed there. It was carried everywhere. His eyes moved away immediately. Some memories deserved privacy. Hours later, pale sunlight slowly appeared beyond the airplane window. Morning stretched across the clouds in soft shades of gold. The captain announced their descent into Chicago. Passengers gradually awakened. Laptop screens lit up. Window shades lifted. Coffee filled the cabin with its familiar aroma. Emma stirred gently. She blinked once, then twice. Confusion crossed her face as she realized where she had been resting. Her eyes widened instantly. She straightened so quickly that she nearly dropped the baby's blanket. Oh my goodness! I am so sorry. Color rushed into her cheeks. I did not mean. Alexander smiled with easy kindness. There is nothing to apologize for. You looked like someone who had not slept in a very long time. Emma lowered her eyes. A quiet laugh escaped despite her embarrassment. I honestly cannot remember the last full night. Alexander looked toward the peaceful baby. I believe she can. Emma followed his gaze. Her daughter was still sleeping peacefully. For the first time during the entire flight, so was her heart. The aircraft touched the runway with a gentle vibration. Morning sunlight poured through the windows as Chicago slowly came into view. Passengers reached for their bags. Seatbelts clicked open one after another. The quiet spell of the night began to disappear. Emma carefully adjusted her daughter's blanket before lifting the sleeping baby into her arms. She turned toward Alexander with an apologetic smile. I still cannot believe I fell asleep like that. I hope I did not make your flight miserable. Alexander shook his head. Quite the opposite. I think it reminded me that people carry burdens we cannot always see. His answer caught her by surprise. Most people would have joked. He had chosen empathy instead. The line of passengers slowly moved toward the front of the cabin. Emma waited patiently, gently bouncing the baby against her shoulder. Alexander reached into the overhead compartment. Without saying a word, he also lowered Emma's small carry-on suitcase. She blinked. You have already helped me enough. It weighs almost nothing. So does kindness. A quiet smile appeared on her face. For the first time in many months, someone had helped her without expecting anything in return. As they stepped into the jet bridge, the cool morning air replaced the warmth of the cabin. Travelers hurried toward baggage claim. Business executives answered phone calls. Families searched for directions. The airport came alive around them. Emma shifted the diaper bag higher onto her shoulder. As she did, a tiny silver bracelet slipped unnoticed from an outer pocket. It landed softly on the carpet. Neither she nor the sleeping baby noticed. Alexander did. He bent down immediately. The bracelet was delicate. A small engraved airplane charm hung beside a tiny heart. On the back, barely visible beneath years of gentle wear, were a few carefully engraved words. "My little miracle." He looked up. Emma had already disappeared into the crowd flowing toward the terminal. He called once. "Excuse me." His voice was swallowed by rolling suitcases and morning announcements. She never turned around. Alexander slipped the bracelet carefully into the inside pocket of his jacket. Not to keep it, to return it. Outside the terminal, Emma stopped beside the rideshare pickup area. She checked the diaper bag, the bottle, the blanket, the extra clothes. Everything seemed to be there. She kissed the baby's forehead. "We made it." The little girl opened sleepy blue eyes and smiled. Emma smiled back. "Chicago. I hope this city is kinder to us." A rideshare vehicle arrived a few moments later. As it pulled away, she looked back toward the terminal only once. The stranger from seat 23B was nowhere to be seen. She whispered almost to herself. "I never even asked his name." Across the airport, a black sedan waited quietly near the executive entrance. Alexander stepped inside. His driver greeted him. "Good morning, Mr. Carter." Alexander nodded politely. "Good morning." His assistant turned from the front passenger seat. "The board meeting begins in 90 minutes. You also have the executive hiring review this afternoon." Alexander listened quietly, then reached into his jacket. He looked once more at the tiny bracelet resting in his hand. "Before anything else, I need to return something." His assistant glanced at the bracelet. "Do you know who it belongs to?" Alexander looked through the windshield as the city awakened beneath the morning sun. "Not yet, but I intend to find out." The sedan pulled away from the curb. Two lives continued in different directions. Neither of them realized their journey together had only just begun. The black sedan glided quietly through downtown Chicago. Morning traffic flowed around towering glass buildings as sunlight reflected across polished streets. Alexander sat silently in the back seat. The tiny silver bracelet rested in the palm of his hand. He traced the engraved words with his thumb. "My little miracle." The inscription felt personal. Loved. Protected. The kind of keepsake no parent carried by accident. His assistant glanced over her shoulder. "I can ask airport security if someone reported a missing item." Alexander considered the suggestion. "Please do. But do not inconvenience anyone. If we find the owner naturally, that will be enough." She nodded and began making a few discreet calls. The sedan pulled beneath the covered entrance of Sterling Carter International. Employees greeted Alexander as he entered the headquarters. "Good morning, Mr. Carter." He smiled politely at each of them. "Good morning." Nothing about his demeanor suggested urgency, yet the bracelet remained safely inside his jacket pocket. Throughout the morning, board meetings came and went. Financial reports filled conference screens. Investment proposals covered long tables. Alexander remained focused, professional, attentive. Till every quiet pause brought his thoughts back to seat 23A, to the exhausted mother who had apologized for falling asleep. Near noon, his assistant entered his office carrying a slim folder. "We found something." Alexander looked up immediately. The airline located the passenger manifest. She placed the folder on his desk. "The bracelet most likely belongs to Emma Parker." Alexander opened the first page. A passport photograph showed the same gentle face from the airplane. Below it appeared a temporary Chicago address. His eyes continued downward. Purpose of travel: employment interview. Arrival date: today. Alexander leaned back slowly. She came here looking for work. It appears so. His assistant hesitated before continuing. There is something else. She handed him another document. Emma's resume. It was attached to an employment inquiry sent this morning. Alexander glanced across the page. Several years of administrative experience. Excellent references. Employment gaps explained by caring for an infant. Volunteer work. Community literacy programs. Everything reflected quiet determination. Nothing asked for sympathy. His assistant spoke carefully. Our Human Resources Department received this through a public application portal. Alexander closed the folder. Does she know this company? We have no indication that she does. He remained silent for a long moment, then looked once more at the bracelet. Fate had quietly crossed their paths twice in less than 12 hours. His assistant smiled slightly. Would you like Human Resources to prioritize her application? Alexander answered without hesitation. No. If she earns an interview, it must happen exactly as it would for anyone else. And the bracelet? I will return it myself. His assistant nodded. I understand. Later that afternoon, Emma stood inside a small furnished apartment she had rented for the week. The room held little more than a crib, a folding table, and 2 suitcases. She unpacked carefully while her daughter played quietly on a blanket spread across the floor. Emma reached for the diaper bag, then froze. Her hands searched every pocket, the front zipper, the side compartment, the small hidden pouch. Nothing. Her breathing became slightly faster. No. She searched again, then again. The bracelet was gone. She slowly sat on the edge of the bed. Tears threatened to appear. It had been the first gift she bought after her daughter was born. Not expensive, just meaningful. The little girl crawled into her mother's lap. Emma hugged her tightly. It is okay. She whispered the words more for herself than for the child. We still have each other. Across the city, Alexander carefully returned the bracelet to its protective velvet pouch before placing it inside his desk drawer. He looked out across the Chicago skyline. Some possessions could be replaced. Others carried pieces of someone's heart. He intended to return both. Morning arrived with the quiet promise of another beginning. Emma dressed carefully for her interview while her daughter sat happily inside a portable playpen beside the small apartment window. She chose the only navy blazer she owned. The fabric had been pressed the night before with patient hands and hopeful determination. She looked into the mirror. You can do this. The words sounded stronger than she felt. A neighbor from the next apartment had agreed to watch the baby for a few hours. The elderly woman smiled warmly as Emma gently placed her daughter into waiting arms. Go chase your opportunity. I will take very good care of your little angel. Emma's eyes softened with gratitude. Thank you. It means more than you know. She kissed her daughter's forehead. I will be back before you know it. The little girl reached toward her mother with a cheerful laugh. Emma smiled through the emotion gathering in her chest. Then she stepped into the hallway. Outside, Chicago bustled with morning energy. Commuters hurried toward trains. Coffee shops welcomed long lines of customers. The city seemed to move with quiet confidence. Emma clutched her resume against her side as she walked toward the towering headquarters where her interview would take place. She stopped at the entrance for only a moment. Glass walls reflected the bright blue sky above. The company's name stretched across polished stone. Sterling Carter International. She took one steady breath, then walked inside. The spacious lobby felt elegant without being overwhelming. Fresh flowers decorated the reception desk. Natural light filled every corner. Employees greeted visitors with genuine smiles rather than rehearsed expressions. Emma quietly approached the receptionist. Good morning. My name is Emma Parker. I have an interview scheduled for 10 o'clock. The receptionist checked the appointment list. Her smile immediately widened. Welcome, Miss Parker. You are right on time. Please have a seat. We will come for you shortly. Emma thanked her and settled into one of the waiting chairs. She straightened the folder resting on her lap. Around her, other candidates reviewed notes or quietly rehearsed answers beneath their breath. She chose something different. She simply closed her eyes for a moment. Not to memorize, to breathe. Several floors above, Alexander stood beside the windows of his office overlooking the city. His assistant entered carrying the day's interview schedule. The Human Resources panel is ready. Alexander accepted the folder without opening it. Everything is proceeding normally? Yes. All candidates are being evaluated under the standard process. He nodded with quiet satisfaction. No exceptions. No special instructions. No influence. His assistant smiled knowingly. I expected that answer. After she left, Alexander opened the folder. Emma's name appeared halfway down the page. He closed it again almost immediately. Some opportunities deserve to arrive without hidden hands. Meanwhile, Emma followed a human resources coordinator through bright hallways lined with photographs of community outreach projects, employee volunteer events, and scholarship recipients. The images surprised her. This company celebrated people as much as success. The coordinator paused outside a conference room. The interview panel will be with you in just a moment. Emma smiled politely. Thank you. As the coordinator walked away, Emma noticed a framed quotation hanging beside the door. Success means very little if kindness does not grow with it. She read the sentence twice. Something about it reminded her of the stranger on the airplane. The quiet voice. The gentle smile. The man who had never once made her feel embarrassed for being exhausted. She wondered where life had taken him after they landed. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. The conference room door slowly opened. Emma gathered her resume, stood with calm determination and stepped forward, completely unaware that somewhere inside the same building, the quiet stranger from seat 23B was only a few floors away. The interview room felt calm. Natural light streamed through tall windows, warming the polished wooden table. 3 members of the Human Resources team greeted Emma with welcoming smiles. Good morning, Miss Parker. Please have a seat. Emma thanked them quietly. She placed her resume neatly on the table. Her hands were steady now. The nervousness had not disappeared. It had simply been replaced by determination. The interview began with familiar questions. Her previous experience, her organizational skills, her ability to manage changing priorities. Emma answered each one honestly. She never exaggerated. She never apologized for the years she had spent raising her daughter. One interviewer smiled. You have a gap in your employment history. Emma nodded. I do. My daughter needed me. I would make the same decision again. The room became quiet, not uncomfortable, respectful. Another interviewer leaned forward slightly. If you receive this position, how would you define success? Emma paused, not because she lacked an answer, because she wanted to choose the right words. Success is earning trust. When people know they can depend on you, the work becomes meaningful. I believe skills can always improve. Character should already be present. One member of the panel wrote something in his notebook. Another smiled almost without realizing it. Several floors above, Alexander reviewed documents between meetings. His office door opened softly. His assistant entered. The interview with Miss Parker has begun. Alexander looked up only briefly. Thank you. He returned to the report in front of him. There was no intention of interrupting the process. No hidden request. No private recommendation. Only quiet confidence in the fairness of the people he had hired. Back inside the interview room, the final question arrived. The senior interviewer folded his hands. Tell us about a difficult moment. Not one where everything worked out. One where you learned something. Emma smiled gently. I do not think difficult moments ever completely disappear. They simply teach us how to carry them. She looked toward the window for a moment. Last night, my daughter and I flew here. I was exhausted. I accidentally fell asleep beside a stranger. A few members of the panel laughed softly. Emma smiled with them. I was embarrassed when I woke up, but he never made me feel ashamed. He reminded me that kindness can be quiet. I hope to be that kind of person wherever I work. The room fell silent again. This time, the silence carried admiration. The interview concluded a few minutes later. Thank you for coming today, Miss Parker. We appreciate your time. Emma stood. I appreciate yours as well. She shook every hand before leaving the room. As the door closed behind her, the panel remained seated. One interviewer looked around the table. "What do you think?" Another answered first. "She has experience." The senior interviewer nodded. "But more importantly, she has integrity." A third member added quietly, "You cannot teach someone to genuinely care about people." The decision came faster than expected. They unanimously marked her as the leading candidate. Meanwhile, Emma stepped into the elevator. She released one slow breath. Whatever happened next, she knew she had been honest. The elevator doors opened onto the executive floor by mistake after another employee pressed the wrong button before exiting. Emma looked into the elegant hallway, uncertain whether to step out or remain inside. At that same moment, Alexander emerged from a nearby conference room. He looked toward the elevator. Emma looked toward him. For one suspended heartbeat, neither of them moved. Recognition arrived first in their eyes. Then came surprise. Emma's voice barely rose above a whisper. "It is you." Alexander smiled with the same quiet warmth she remembered from the flight. "Welcome to Chicago. And I believe I still have something that belongs to you." Emma stepped out of the elevator almost cautiously. The hallway suddenly felt much quieter than the busy lobby below. She looked at Alexander, then at the polished nameplate mounted outside the nearby office. Sterling Carter, Chief Executive Officer. Her eyes returned to him. For a brief moment she simply stared. You are the Chief Executive Officer?" Alexander gave a small nod. "I am." A faint smile appeared. "I was hoping we would meet again under less surprising circumstances." Emma let out a quiet breath. "So that is why everyone greeted you. I thought you worked here." Alexander answered gently. "I do. Just perhaps in a different role than you imagined." Before Emma could say another word, his assistant approached carrying a small velvet pouch. Alexander accepted it. "I believe this belongs to your family." He held out the pouch. Emma opened it carefully. The tiny silver bracelet rested inside exactly as she remembered it. Her fingers trembled. She lifted it slowly. The little airplane charm reflected the afternoon sunlight. For several seconds, she could not speak. "I searched everywhere. I thought it was gone forever." Alexander smiled. "It waited patiently, just as I hoped you would." Emma looked up. "I do not know how to thank you." "You already did. You trusted a complete stranger enough to fall asleep." She laughed softly. "I do not think I had much choice. Exhaustion usually wins." It certainly did. Both of them smiled. The conversation felt remarkably natural, as though they had known one another longer than a single flight. Alexander glanced toward the conference rooms. "How did your interview go?" Emma answered honestly. "I believe it went well. But that decision belongs to your human resources team." "It does. And it will remain that way." She looked at him with quiet curiosity. "You are not going to influence the result?" Alexander shook his head without hesitation. "If they believe you are the right person, you should earn that opportunity. Because of your own ability, not because we happen to share a flight." Emma's shoulders relaxed. "Thank you. I would not want it any other way." At that moment, the human resources director walked down the hallway carrying a folder. She smiled when she noticed Emma. "There you are. We have been looking for you." Emma turned toward her. "Is everything all right?" The director nodded warmly. "More than all right." The interview panel completed its evaluation earlier than expected. She opened the folder. "We were unanimously impressed. Your professionalism, your experience, your integrity. We would be honored to offer you the position." Emma blinked. She almost forgot to breathe. "You mean I got the job?" "You certainly did." The director extended an official offer letter. Emma accepted it with both hands. Her eyes filled with grateful tears that never quite fell. "Thank you. I promise you will never regret this decision." "We do not believe we will." The director smiled before excusing herself to another meeting. Silence returned to the hallway. Emma looked toward Alexander. "You truly had nothing to do with this?" He answered with complete sincerity. "I did not even speak to the interview panel. I wanted your future to begin with fairness." Emma held the offer letter close against her chest. For the first time since arriving in Chicago, hope no longer felt fragile, it felt real. Alexander looked at the tiny bracelet now safely around her daughter's photograph inside the open pouch. Some things found their way home. Perhaps people did too. The first Monday arrived with crisp autumn air. Emma stood outside Sterling Carter International, holding a cup of coffee that had already grown cold. She looked up at the glass building one more time. This time, she was not arriving as a visitor. She belonged here. The elevator doors opened onto her department. New faces welcomed her with friendly smiles. A manager introduced her to the team. This is Emma Parker. She will be joining our operations department. Several co-workers greeted her warmly. One offered to help her learn the internal systems. Another showed her where the employee daycare center was located. Emma felt something unfamiliar. Relief. Not because the work would be easy, because she no longer had to carry everything alone. Weeks slowly turned into months. Emma never tried to stand out. She simply did every task with care. She arrived early. She stayed organized. She remembered birthdays. She learned people's names. When deadlines became stressful, she quietly offered help before anyone asked. Her kindness spread through the department almost unnoticed. Then one afternoon, an unexpected problem interrupted the entire office. A software failure delayed hundreds of customer requests. Phones rang continuously. Employees rushed between desks. Frustration filled the room. Emma remained calm. She gathered the team together. We cannot fix everything at once, but we can help one customer at a time. Her steady voice changed the atmosphere. Panic slowly gave way to purpose. People stopped blaming one another. They began working together. By the end of the afternoon, every urgent request had been resolved. No celebration followed. Everyone simply smiled with quiet satisfaction. Several floors above, Alexander received the operations report. He noticed something unusual. Customer satisfaction had increased significantly. Employee turnover had dropped. Internal cooperation had reached its highest level in years. He looked toward his executive assistant. What changed? She smiled knowingly. Not what. Who? She handed him another report. Several department managers had independently written the same observation. Emma Parker. Alexander read each comment carefully. Always respectful. Always prepared. Always willing to help. Creates calm during pressure. Raises the confidence of everyone around her. He closed the folder slowly. None of the reports mentioned extraordinary talent. None described dramatic achievements. They described character. Later that afternoon, Alexander walked through the operations department without announcing his visit. Conversations continued naturally. Employees greeted him politely before returning to work. He preferred it that way. As he passed Emma's desk, he noticed she was helping a new employee understand a complicated scheduling process. She never looked toward his office. She never tried to impress him. She simply finished explaining the procedure before wishing the new colleague good luck. Only then did she notice Alexander standing nearby. She smiled politely. Good afternoon. He returned the greeting. Good afternoon. I have been hearing very positive things about your department. Emma glanced around the office. They make my job easy. They help each other. Alexander looked thoughtfully at the team working together. I believe someone helped create that environment. Emma shook her head gently. Kindness spreads. Usually someone else starts it first. Her words lingered after she returned to work. Alexander continued walking through the office. He suddenly remembered a quiet flight above the clouds. A tired mother. A sleeping baby. One simple decision not to wake someone who desperately needed rest. He smiled almost to himself. Leadership was not always loud. It began with a small act that nobody expected to matter. And somehow, that single moment of kindness was still changing lives, one quiet day at a time. Spring arrived quietly. The trees outside Sterling Carter International had turned a gentle shade of green, and sunlight filled the city with the kind of warmth that invited people to slow down. Inside the company, something special was happening. Employees gathered in the main atrium for the annual community day. Every year, The company partnered with local charities, children's hospitals, and neighborhood organizations to celebrate service before success. This year felt different, not because of the event, because of the people standing together. Emma arrived carrying her daughter, now smiling, walking confidently with tiny determined steps beside her mother. The little girl wore the same silver bracelet around her wrist. The tiny airplane charm sparkled beneath the morning sun. Co-workers greeted them like family. Children laughed nearby while volunteers packed school supplies and books for families across Chicago. The atmosphere felt peaceful. Hope had become something everyone could see. Alexander moved quietly through the crowd, thanking volunteers one by one. He shook hands. He listened. He encouraged. Nothing about his presence demanded attention. When he reached Emma, he smiled warmly. "I am glad you came." Emma looked around the busy atrium. "I would not have missed it. My daughter has been excited all week." Almost as if she understood her name had not been spoken, the little girl looked up. Her bright blue eyes settled on Alexander. For a second, she simply stared. Then her face lit up with recognition. She released her mother's hand and took several tiny steps toward him. Emma instinctively followed, ready to help if needed, and said, The little girl reached into the small paper bag she had been carrying. She carefully removed a folded paper airplane. It had been colored with crayons. Tiny stars covered both wings. She lifted it toward Alexander with both hands. "This is for you." Her young voice filled the quiet space around them. Alexander accepted the paper airplane carefully, as though it were something priceless. "Thank you. I will treasure it." Emma smiled. She insisted on making it herself. Alexander unfolded the paper gently. Inside, written in large uneven letters that Emma had clearly helped her trace, were a few simple words. "You gave Mommy a place to rest." Alexander read the sentence twice. He looked toward Emma. Neither of them spoke. They did not need to. Some gratitude became stronger in silence. Around them, the laughter of families continued. Children played. Volunteers shared meals. Life moved forward. Alexander folded the paper airplane once again and placed it carefully inside the inner pocket of his jacket, the same pocket where the little silver bracelet had once rested. Some gifts belonged beside the heart. As the afternoon sunlight settled across the city skyline, Emma watched her daughter laugh with other children. She thought back to a quiet airplane cabin above the clouds. One stranger, one gentle decision, one moment that could easily have been forgotten, and said, it became the beginning of everything that followed. Sometimes people believe life changes because of grand speeches, remarkable victories, or extraordinary luck. Sometimes it does, but more often, life changes because someone chooses patience instead of annoyance, compassion instead of judgment, kindness instead of convenience. One flight lasted only a few hours. Its destination appeared on every boarding pass. Yet the journey that truly mattered never appeared on any ticket. It began the moment one exhausted mother found a safe place to rest. And it continued because one quiet act of kindness found a home in another human heart. Perhaps that is how the most meaningful stories always begin. Not with power, not with wealth, but with ordinary kindness, shared at exactly the moment someone needs it most.